Welcome to Unsheltered Conversations, where we explore housing and community solutions from the people who are on the front lines. I'm Scott Larson. Today, we're talking about a number that many of us may have heard, but few fully understand. The number is 211. 211 is a critical gateway connecting people to resources from food and shelter to health and crisis support. And February 11th is recognized annually as 211 Day, a moment to reflect on the power of connection in service to our communities. I'm joined today by someone I've known and admired for many, many years, Elizabeth Andrade, Executive Director of 211 Orange County. Elizabeth's work at 211 OC with community partners demonstrates how one call can change the course of a life. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here today. And it's been a great privilege to work with you on many different initiatives over the years.
Thank you so much, Scott, for inviting me. It's always great to see you. You are the master connector. So really appreciate you showcasing 211, and I'm eager to have this conversation.
You know, in our background, and as we both have done different things in the community, you and I first met when you were working for Families Forward, and then you had the opportunity to lead the efforts at Family Assistance Ministries, and then now leading at 211 OC. So Elizabeth, for our listeners, they may be familiar with, or it should be familiar with 911 or 411, but many of our listeners, 211 is a number that they may have seen, but not necessarily a system that they understand. Can you start by explaining what 211 is and how it came about and what services it can connect people to?
Absolutely. And I hope that for those listening, 211 is a familiar number, even if you yourself have not experienced calling 211. But really what it is a nationally recognized short code. So like you mentioned, Scott, 911 or 411, although 411 is not as relevant these days, I'm told by the younger crowd, that 211 is your one-stop shop. We are the connectors for social and human resources, especially now around health resources. By dialing 211, we cover 98% of the country. So wherever you stand, you can dial 211 and be connected to your hub of social resources. And so what that means typically is someone who has been informed of 211, who may be facing a need in housing or food. They may need enrollment in social benefits. And so by simply dialing 211, they can get connected to the resources that they need.
How specifically does 211 operate in Orange County, and who's answering the calls and training that they receive? Yeah, give us a little insight on if one was in Orange County, how that would happen.
I know, Scott, your audience is broad, so just a level set on Orange County. We're a population of 3.1 million people. And that's important because when I share the next stat, it's surprising, especially if you have a perception of what Orange County is or the type of people that live in Orange County. On a yearly basis, 211 OC handles about 500,000 requests for services. These come through the 211 call center, the connection center. They come via text, chat, as well as through our website, 211oc.org, for folks that are able to self-navigate. So really important that we are meeting people where they are and providing them with connection in whatever means they choose to connect with us. That's been really important. And one area that we've been focused on for the last several years is on enhancing that ability to connect for people. When somebody calls 211, we have a team of trained, what we call information referral specialists, but it's an operator, someone that has been trained in de-escalation, has been supported in understanding the complexity of the systems that we interact with and, exist to ensure that people who are calling are listened to and they feel listened to. They will provide an opportunity for the caller to express what their need is. So if I'm calling 211 today and I'm looking for rental assistance, I would express that as my primary need, but we don't just stop there. We want to ensure that we are connecting to as many resources as would benefit that person that day. And so we go through an assessment. Think of us as like your triage when you go into urgent care or the ER. We want to make sure that we are capturing the full situation of that person, and then we're connecting them to the doctor or the specialist per se in that example. Typically, we see folks that are needing more than one resource. Typically, two or more resources are being requested And that's identified because we go deeper in those assessments. And so, in brief, our team is highly trained. We have clear expectations on how quickly we answer the phone and how long it typically will take to kind of handle a call. We do that similar method through text messaging. And then if somebody's self navigating through the website and they run up against a challenge, they're always encouraged to give us a call and we can pick up where they left off.
So you mentioned both, well, there's the calls that come in and then texting and the online chat. Are most of the connections through actually someone calling, or is it equally spread? And do you transfer someone from a text to a call? How does that work on your end?
Yeah, so on a monthly basis, we receive about 12,000 calls for support. About 7,000, in addition, are text messages that can convert to calls and vice versa, can convert to a text message for follow-up. And then about 20,000 self-navigations through the website.
That's absolutely amazing because I remember many years ago, it was just the call. It was just that. And then it's been great to see the addition of all the resources on the website and then in turn with texting in the chat. So kudos to the growth of 211OC. So let's take a step out from that because this podcast is going out to a national audience because 211, as you mentioned, isn't just an Orange County, California resource. It's a nationwide network. Can you describe how that network works and how widespread it is? You mentioned, I think 98% of the country is covered. Can you delve into that a little bit and even how you interact with some of your other colleagues across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So 211 is a nationwide network. About half of the 211s are embedded in their local United Ways. I have found in my just over 2-year tenure with 211 Orange County, the strength of the network. Some people will recognize the United Way brand, but not the 211 brand. And so there's a nice synergy that happens within those 211s that are within their United Ways. The other half of the 211s are independent or within a different type of parent organization or backbone organization. So we really have two sets of networks being a United Way 211. One is the 211 network. And so we have a very strong association across California that we're a part of, and then a 211 national association that's under the United Way worldwide umbrella. And what that means is that we have a shared standard. We all use the same taxonomy codes. And so the way that we categorize our resources, how we respond, kind of industry level standards are all shared across all 211s. And this was done intentionally to ensure that regardless of where you called a 211, that you would receive at least the basic same response across the network. We share best practices. The main component of a 211 is the social service connectivity, but we also have disaster preparedness, information, awareness, response, recovery in our portfolio. And so that's level of work that if nothing else, and hopefully, never happens, but if you find yourself in a situation where you're hit by a natural disaster, earthquake, fire, tornado, that there is the role that 211 steps up and plays, which is connecting to resources during that time of disaster and supporting people through their recovery. So that's another benefit of the network. There's different disasters that happen in different parts of the region at different points in time. And part of the role that we play is that we back each other up. And so if something happens in Texas and their systems are down, they reroute to a local 211 partner so that they can start taking their calls. And in Orange County, we saw that with a year ago with the fires in LA that greatly impacted that 211 network or sister networks in LA. And they reached out and asked us to pick up some of their calls as they were completely inundated. They received 80,000 calls 10 days following the fires. And so they're just underwater. And so if something happens in Orange County or in your local area, that is another role that the 211 network plays. But getting back to kind of the power of the network, we gather together as a network to understand what each other is doing. We play different roles in different counties in addition to our basic roles to connect people, our essential role to connect people to resources. Folks leverage their 211s to connect to volunteer opportunities. They use their 211 infrastructure to create hubs of information for other types of resources like childcare resources and connecting to additional childcare resources. So there's a lot that can be built on the infrastructure of 211. And that's where the innovation, I think, comes in as a part of the network, is hearing what everyone is doing and trying to figure out what best meets the needs of the local community.
And that's great to hear the the intent of consistency, across the network. Granted, certain communities might have a certain amount of or higher resources than others, but with the intention of being consistent. And then the aspect of the disaster component, because that is a major role. Because if you think of the wildfires in LA a year ago, when that natural disaster or man made disaster happens, who do you call? There's the 911, but then that's the immediate need. But then when you look at what happens after, what resources, housing, food, variety of different things. So that is such an important role that people maybe not fully understand. And it was great to hear what you just said, that your team in Orange County basically supported the team in the LA area. Do you know, looking back to COVID-19, did the 211 system also play a role during that time and reveal any gaps in our safety net? Because that was a new type of emergency that nobody really had encountered before.
It was, and it was before my tenure with 211 in Orange County. So I have a perspective of the role that 211 played from a partner perspective. And I'll mention that 211s are the best reflection of the resources in the community. I think you mentioned that, Scott, is each community has a variety of resources. They may differ from community to community. But in Orange County, we rely on 1,100 service providers that are providing over 3,000 services to our community members. And it is our task to ensure that those resources are curated and supported, and that people trust, our network trust us to update the resources, because we are really serving as a reflection of them. And during COVID, it was critical to ensure that all of the resources, whether they were existing or whether they were just coming online, that they be included in the 211 directory, because no one organization could take on the overwhelming demand that we saw, especially around food and housing resources. So the 211 resource allowed us to streamline processes in a time where information was coming at us pretty quickly. There was some additional resources that were coming to the local community that needed to be operationalized, and required the centralized model to make us efficient. And we exercised that. We leaned into that as community partners. One example was we ensured that all rental assistance ran through 211 as a triage and assessor, and then routed those kind of pre-qualified households to the appropriate organization to receive care. And that reduced hugely the burden on all the organizations, because we could all say at that point, call 211, go through that assessment. That's the starting point. That is your main front door to enter for that resource. On the back end, what it gave us was the data: how many calls for services, how did that match up to the resources that we had available to us, who in the county, this is a county of 34 cities, how were those requests distributed across those 34 cities, where were we seeing additional demands for care, how many of the folks calling from one city were also requesting food assistance, were those requests being met? If not, then we needed more resources there. So it gave us real time data that we could use to prioritize resources going out to our community members.
And you mentioned a couple things I just want to kind of go back to. With 1,100 organizations, I think you mentioned, that are part of your network. If you're a general consumer in the community and you're trying to, you know, find a shelter or find somewhere else, whether or not it's online, et cetera, how do you really navigate that? And I think that's a role that 211 plays, to understand, if you're someone who's on the streets or in another setting, how do you understand that? So I think that's an important resource. And then stepping into the data, touched on the data and the data it generates. And does that data, from what you're looking at in Orange County, California, does that roll up into some national data stats? And how does that inform locally, statewide, or nationally any policy decisions up to the federal level? Does it work that way?
It does. It does. And we're getting better as a network to support with the visibility on that data and the power of the data. Locally in Orange County, we use the data to inform our city partners or city council members, our city managers, on what their residents are requesting. And so we use it in a very simplistic way. These are the number of calls that we've received. These are the main categories that folks in your city are looking, what type of resources are looking for. We roll that up into the districts for the supervisors. 211s of California also take all of the California 211 data. They roll it up to ensure policy support is being made. I don't know if many will, well, I'll say 211 is unique in that it does not have a consistent line item in our state budget or federal budget. So each 211, although we strive for standardization, there are differences depending on the funding stack that each 211 has access to. So one of the main areas that we've been prioritizing the data is to highlight how 211 is infrastructure. Without 211, what would service coordination and access to care look like? The data is helping to turn the understanding around the volume that we manage and the critical role that we play. So that's been at that level. And then at the federal level, United Way's worldwide have leaned into visualizing the data and presenting the data in ways that can be consumed by our national policymakers to help inform around housing needs, areas that support folks, either preventing them into entering homelessness or resolving homelessness, food insecurity. There's quite a bit of data that we have and capture around folks requesting food, the social service net versus SNAP. There's quite a bit of layering around the 211 local data that then rolls up and is actively being used to influence and support with appropriate policymaking.
And that's important because I look at from a housing perspective, we'll touch into things in a little bit, but on that end, when you look at whether or not it's the point in time counts, housing inventory count, and your data, it's so important to look at it nationally and how that data is rolling up. So I'm glad that that data in one form or another is doing that. But is there, from a personal perspective, is there some of the data and the trends that you're concerned about, particularly related to housing insecurity or homelessness? What are you seeing?
So in Orange County, California, about 52% of the calls and requests for services that we're handling are related to housing. So that housing category includes folks that are unhoused and looking for emergency shelter, folks that are looking for rental assistance so that they can stay housed, and people that are looking for affordable housing are the main three category. About half of the total calls are looking for rental assistance, and the resource of rental assistance is so low in comparison to the demand. And so I'm keeping my eye on that matching. Not everyone who's looking for rental assistance we know is going to result in experiencing homelessness. But there are attributes that, with the volume of data that we have and host, we can start to narrow down on what attributes would make someone most likely to enter into homelessness. And one other data set that we have in our portfolio is the homeless management information system data, which captures everyone who's engaging with federally funded housing programs, and some that are not, that choose to include their data there to give us a full perspective of housing programs for our community. It's simpler today through technology to take 211 data and HMIS data and combine it to identify the longitudinal record of someone's experience. So if I called 211 today, I requested rental assistance. There was nothing there for me. The outcome was there was no resource. I called in a month, the resource was there. I accessed it. 6 months from now, my profile comes up in HMIS. There are ways that we can now track and find those trends. And although today that's a bit of a rear view mirror perspective, the intention is to take all of that information and, again, those factors that may make someone more likely to experience homelessness, take those and implement them into our assessment so that we can catch people before they enter into homelessness as a more likely case and start to work with them early. So it's a bit of data review and analysis and trends tracking, but the intentionality of that is to refine our workflows so that we can catch people before they enter into homelessness. And given the number of calls that we receive around housing, it's a natural area for us to lean into.
No, and that makes perfect sense. When you're looking at, you talked about rent, utility assistance, eviction prevention, but then you say there's gaps, there's not enough that you can provide. Does that inform funders as well? Because if there's a need for more rental assistance or utility assistance, have you seen that data to help a funder in the local community?
It's our desire for the funders to trust the 211 data as a source of truth for those funding decision-making efforts. We have seen the local board of supervisors make an investment in rental assistance or homelessness prevention program that has a portion of rental assistance and a portion into case management or care coordination and support. It's a pilot today, but additional learnings will be captured from that. You know, being in this industry, Scott, for so many years, we know that rental assistance is such a critical and important resource It's just how do we target to support the households that are most likely to enter into homelessness? Because we could make the case everyone needs it. If you're calling and don't have enough to pay your rent, like there is a risk level there that we can identify for that person in that household and what they're going through. But how do we best target those prevention dollars that are so finite? And we can, argue that someday there'll be enough. I could say that's probably not ever going to be enough rental assistance dollars. But for funders, understanding where people are calling from, how often, who's accessing, why are they accessing, it helps create a common criteria around rental assistance dollars that I think will help us move the needle in reducing people entering into homelessness.
Right. Particularly families that have been housed, they just need that critical aid. Do you have a story, an example of a caller that entered the 211 system and what changed, or how did that connection help them get to where they need to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a variety of situations that approach 211, and we have made it very simple for this conversation, but there is really a multidisciplinary team behind 211. And so, regardless of what someone calls about, whether it's housing or food assistance, utility assistance, mental health support, our team is trained to support. And whether it's the first person who answers the call or that transition, we need to make sure that that person receives care. But I'll say there have been multitudes of families who have called us. The family that calls and is experiencing homelessness, they're in their car. They don't know where to go. They don't necessarily want to advertise their situation. They typically are concerned that their children will be taken away. There's a very real fear there for them. They can call 211. They can choose not to share their specific information with us, but more so gather information that helps them navigate. They can build trust with us over that call. We can share with them what they may be eligible for, getting them enrolled in CalFresh, or I'll say SNAP benefit, supplemental nutrition program. California calls it CalFresh. We can get them enrolled in healthcare benefits through Medicaid and ensure that they at least have those basic safety net supports to help support their situation. We'll then transfer them to our trained housing navigation team that will ensure that they are on our coordinated entry or community listing for available resources for housing. We also manage the bed reservation system for emergency shelters for families. So we think about that one-stop shop for that family with young children that is in their car that night. We are able to safely and accurately navigate them to that available resource. And we've seen that time and time again as we move people through that workflow and into the emergency shelter, and from the emergency shelter, moving them into that next available housing opportunity for them. It does help resolve homelessness, especially for families, in the way that we've integrated the housing response system into 211. But there are too many families and too many individuals that do not yet know about 211. And that's really the hope with broadening the perspective on 211, is how do we ensure that people know that it's as simple as calling to ensure that you can begin your journey back to stability or reduce those challenges that someone may be facing. And it's a little bit challenging, I will say, in full transparency, because we are as good as the resources that are available to us. And so someone may say, may be frustrated because they called and they were requesting rental assistance, and we just, the system didn't have it available. And so as a reflection of the system, it appears to the end user, to the client, like 211 was not helpful.
Yeah, it's not helpful. Correct.
Yeah. And so I share that because, we have a tremendous amount of success that we see through 211 and just getting people connected to resources. And then there's also the reality of, although we thrive and gather the data of where there may be gaps in the system, the reality is that that gap in the system is a very real situation for the person that's relying on that service or that care.
But that's a very important thing because it is a reflection of what's happening, what services are available in your community. And, as HomeAid, we're builders and developers, and a lot of our audience is going to be unfamiliar with this concept of a 211, but we've encouraged, when many of our affiliates around the country are making care kits, which are resources which can be given out to people on the streets or a person on the street corner. But we've encouraged them to put 211 cards in there, at least a referral card. But are there other areas that builders and developers and other housing partners can work more closely with 211 in their community? Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, I would say becoming a 211 champion is easier than you think. The resource cards are of great help, encouraging everyone to keep them on you. I mean, keep a couple in your car. We're running across people of all paths of life, always, and just our general journeys in life here. So I would encourage you to promote 211. When I'm at dinner with a friend or in my non 211 hat per se related efforts, it's amazing to understand how many people do not know what 211 is. And, having that conversation with people, and, I always say the power of three is magnificent. So if you could take it upon yourself to share with three people about 211 and the role that 211 plays, and hopefully no one in anyone's immediate circle will need it. But if they do, they'll know about it. And it's even just in concept, understanding that this resource exists in 98% of the communities across the country is pretty mind blowing. 211 is not taught about in school. We don't have preschoolers learning about 211 like they are about 911. And so I would say education is the best way to help support 211. In addition to that, we are all 501c3s. We all do rely on the contributions of the community. And so if there's ever an opportunity to help support your local 211, whether it's with volunteering or contributions or whatever it may be, know that it is a worthwhile investment to support 211s. And then if there's any intersectionality between community resources, I believe, Scott, your group is a group of doers and
Yes.
overachievers. And so they may be associated with another charitable organization. I always say encourage all community resources to be listed on your local 211. Advocate that 211 be the strong connector and hub that it has been built to be.
Yeah, that's great. So we're coming up to February, and February 11th, the little play on numbers, is 211 Day. And what does that day mean to you, and how do we promote that, and what are communities engaging with to promote February 11th as 211 Day?
I've grown up in my professional career in this space, in the space of serving and supporting community members. I do believe everyone deserves the right to achieve their full potential. And so I've always had a perspective on 211. And I was blown away when I took on this role about the lack of awareness of 211, like I've described. It baffles me. So for me, 211 Day, February 11th, is an opportunity to showcase 211 and the power of the network across the country. 211s will partake in different activities, whether it's highlighting their staff and recognizing the team that supports and fuels and drives 211s, whether it's appreciating their community partners and hosting events to bring people together, whether it is highlighting data and trends for their community. We are all locking arms across the country to reflect the power of 211 and bring awareness around the work that we're doing in our local communities. And so to me, the 211 Day event is a tremendous opportunity. This will be my third February 11th in this role. And we have some big things planned in Orange County for February 11th. It is our accountability point. We will gather about 400 of our partners together over a morning event where we will showcase what we've done over the last year and what we have planned ahead. Again, this is community information for community decision making. We rely on our partners. And so the power of the network is part of what we will ensure we are highlighting and supporting. Lots of social media. That's the other thing. If you can follow your 211 in your local community on social media, that's of great help. It keeps you informed and keeps you aware of what they're doing. So 211 Day,
Yep.
I have it marked with a big heart on my
I bet you do.
calendar. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
I'm excited to do it because even from HomeAid's perspective in the past, we've highlighted it, and that's why it was important for me to do this podcast with you today. So Elizabeth, thank you for shining a light on the quiet but essential work of 211. It truly is the front line, lifeline for many people in our communities, and meets people where they're at and truly has the opportunity to build a pathway to get them the support they need. So for our listeners, please share this episode, spread the word about 211 in your communities, and especially mark your calendar, as Elizabeth talked about, 211 Day, February 11th, because one call can truly change a life. This has been Unsheltered Conversations. I'm Scott Larson, and thank you for listening.